Alright guys, so thought I would put together a little presentation, a little discussion maybe on Antigone, specifically looking at irony and really the themes of the tragedy, so we'll go over that at the end. But there's a whole bunch of stuff to talk about here, so let's get to it. There we go. So, Antigone, like Oedipus, is steeped in irony. So we're going to take a look at that and see how Sophocles presents these. Before we do that, though, I think it's important for us to look at why Sophocles employed so much irony. So the first off, and probably a primary purpose, is it made for a far more interesting play to see how the pieces fit, and it helped to keep the viewer engaged to look for these ironies. Kind of, a little bit of a scavenger hunt, really, because as all of these ironies were playing out, the audience would have caught on to them and seen the layers of complexity to the play. Now, you need to consider this play does not have a lot of stagecraft to it, does not have a lot of action there. There are people in costuming that are speaking out. They don't make a lot of movements. It's mostly dialogue. So he kind of had to rely on some literary devices to keep the audience engaged. So on top of that, it supported his theme that often what we think will happen is not often in our control, but the God's case in this case. So I think there may have been a message in that. So starting off with some ironies. Right off the bat, we have an irony of both Ismene and Antigone's views. Ironic because they mirror Polynices and Oedipus in their perspectives of loyalty. Also, the consideration of what's going on. Antigone is going against the law or against the city, like Polynices was. She's going after, burying him. And Ismene kind of mirrors Oedipus in the sense that, it's protecting the city, although both of them are kind of in dubious moral moral perspectives on all this. It's also ironic that the first decree that Creon sets up to establish order and control is disobeyed, not only disobeyed by anyone, or just someone, randomly, but his own kin, someone of his own exact house, right under his own nose, really. There's also an ongoing irony of the fact that Creon seems to believe fully that it was a man who did it, when in fact it was a woman, and that's played out. And we have to understand that that was a very particular thing also of this time period, that a woman is brazen in taking such a liberty. But at the same time, women were the ones commissioned to dress the dead and perform these ceremonies. So it's a bit ironic that he didn't even consider a woman would have done it in the first place. And when Creon is creating this decree, he is essentially stripping women of a holy right that they have. And let's be honest, they don't have tons of them to begin with. So it's kind of a big deal. And a woman in the audience would have understood the umbrage that Antigone is taking in this case. So moving on, here's some more ironies. There is an irony in the fact that Antigone is upholding a law while breaking one at the same time. We have a religious law she's upholding, but in that, by doing that, she is forced to break a law of the city. So there's a whole conversation going on there that an audience would key into. It's ironic that Creon, attempting to create order and avoid anarchy, is in fact creating anarchy by defying the gods. And we see that play out in the end, don't we? Antigone is both defying family and honoring it at the same time. She's defying her uncle, / whatever else he is, and yet honoring Polynices, her brother. So there's really no way to win, and it's a lose-lose situation, no matter what she does. Now Creon, meanwhile, is choosing to honor the state, so he thinks, but is actually dishonoring it by defying the gods and his family. So let's put that into perspective a little bit. Creon does say no one is honors or finds friendship more important than me. A lot of you guys keyed into that, but he seems to still emphasize the state is the most important thing. Now, the irony in that is the state is made up of people, so he's looking at it from this ideological standpoint instead of the practical, and that it's people that make up the city. And he continues through most of the play to disregard and dishonor the people around him. So he kind of contradicts himself in there. Now, an example of that, here we go, is that the Centauri is probably one of the most loyal people. He's a terribly loyal man, and he knows what he's up against with Creon, and bearer of bad news as he is. And despite Creon's accusations, he ends up being what Creon has been asking for all along, a loyal subject who is trying to uphold the law. This guy ends up hunting down Antigone. Fortunate for him, because Antigone's not exactly in hiding, because Creon threatens the guy. So he again obeys Creon and manages to find who it was who did it. Now, some even more ironies. Haman also offers some irony as a young man with the voice of reason. You wouldn't expect it to come from a young man. Usually it's the youth who are, the silly and, reckless. And he comes and really makes a great case for leadership. Listen to your people. You have to be aware. Everybody's afraid of you. Maybe you need to consider what you're doing and ask for advice, dude, And of course, Creon brushes him off like, you're just youthful and stupid. How could you know? And, again, Haman ends up being the guy that we side with here. He does eventually go all kind of Romeo and Juliet as he threatens his own life when Creon doesn't relent and continues to criticize him. So, there's that. But it also is ironic that while Haman argues to Creon to use reason, Creon did the same exact thing to Oedipus in his own play. So Haman is really essentially taking the role of Creon in this play as the voice of reason. And hey, you're nuts. Why are you doing this? Now, there's also the way, and this is a big one. Now, there's a way that Antigone is punished. Not a lot of people caught this one, so let's talk about this. Creon decides he's going to lock her away in a cave, and she will be rationed food and be able to pray for her gods for release or whatever. And he basically says, let the fates have with her what they will. What he's effectively doing here is burying her alive, right? She's locked in a cave in a sort of burial, but she isn't actually dead, considering what her crime was. This is an ultimate irony, right? He also is washing his hands of it, right? So he wants to avoid the blame for her fate, and it's in some ways an acknowledgement of what he's doing, and the gods maybe not being happy with him, or in some ways trying to circumvent the will of his people. But what he doesn't realize is that her fate is directly tied to his, and he also, in a sense, is going against his own decree, because if she dies, he already buries her. He's already buried her, in a sense. And that whole decree in the first place was to bury those who were disloyal. Well, that's what he's actually doing in the first place right here. So, again, yet another irony. There's more. Here we go. Antigone is actually upset over her fate. She blames her family, but she also took the action herself. So there's irony in the way Antigone laments towards the end there when she realizes that she is going to be locked away. She had it in her head, apparently, from the get-go, that she was going to be able to get away with it. It seems like all our heroes do this. Then she ironically compares herself to Niobe, and it's ironic considering that both of them are actually mythological to begin with, and our audience would probably have picked up on that. Yes, Niobe is a born of the gods, but Antigone herself is a mythological character. Even after Tiresias lays into Creon, it's only when the Choragus, the representative of the citizens, tell him what to do, does Creon actually relent. So this is exactly what everyone has been trying to get Creon to do in the first place. So it's ironic that that's finally what happens. It's, Tiresias tears into him, and Creon and the Choragus says, hey, he's never been known to be wrong, and right, and Creon goes, yeah, I know, what should I do? Finally, that is it. That moment there, he says, what should I do? He asks someone else. Finally. Right? So there's irony in that. Right? But that's again, there it is, an agnoresis. Now, Sophocles also plays with irony in the Paean here, where the chorus celebrates Creon's anagnorisis right after that. And this is a great celebration and tribute to the gods, specifically it's Bacchus and Dionysus. Pick up, hopefully you picked up on the fact that it's Dionysus in this and not Apollo. That seems to be the du jour god that's focused on here. But we know that things are about to go down and go down bad at the end. And then we see how everything goes out, and there's a couple of final ironies we could probably discuss in the way things happen. Everybody dies, the whole blood on Antigone's face and the contrast of the red with the white is supposed to be an innocence thing and all that sort of thing. But I think that does the trick. I mean, we can see there are lots of ironies in there. Now, final thoughts here, kind of wrap up the tragedy and the thematic ideas. In all three of Sophocles' plays, there's an overarching theme of submission to the will of gods, that man is truly not in control of his fate. Now, this was a religious festival, so consider that he's keeping with a sort of religious message. That would have been appropriate, and his audience would understand that. We're reading it, obviously, in a more secular sort of context, but it's important for us to see that was what was going on. This also proved some sense of comfort or release from the audience, or catharsis, because they didn't fret about how their lives go as long as they remained faithful to the gods. And again, we can still connect all of this to, what you can and can't control. Yeah. There's also a subcurrent message about the willfulness of man, because between blame shifting and outright denial of facts, we prefer to stick to the convenient narratives of our own desires. So this, according to Sophocles, is the primary root of our own tragic flaws. So hopefully we're able to see kind of how all these plays fit together. They do fit. We do see nuanced differences between Creon and Oedipus and Antigone, for that matter, as supposedly tragic heroes across the board. So we'll take a little bit further look at that as we begin drafting these essays. But hopefully this helps to kind of clear up some of what Sophocles was doing with them, and what his ultimate message was to his audience. So there you have it. Hopefully, again, that helped clear things up, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.